And now to the other side of the coin, a Ukrainian who came here to Ireland and established what is now a thriving business. Because in Dublin, the name Beshov is absolutely synonymous with great fish and chips. And that enterprise would never have been born had it not been for a mutiny on board a Russian battleship, the Potemkin, back in 1905. Because on board the Potemkin was a young man, a young sailor indeed, called Iván Bešov. And this is his story.
The famous Russian film Battleship Potemkin tells the story of mutiny on the Potemkin, which sparked revolution in the Russian Empire in 1905. Dramatic scenes show a massacre on the well-known landmark in the port of Odessa, the city's famous steps. Among the crew of the Potemkin was a young man called Iván Bešov, a name which now hangs over some of Dublin's best-known restaurants. So how did he come to be a successful businessman thousands of miles from home? Ivan came from Dashny near Odessa. At the time, it was a poor village with high emigration. The local bishop proudly shows us the ornate church where the Beshov family would have worshipped. Ivan's father was a magistrate, and the deputy head of the village, who has researched the family, says this is where the Beshov home once stood, and the children went to school a short distance away. The school was rebuilt since the Beshov's time. When we visited it, pupils and staff invited us to join their celebration of National Teachers' Day. There are no Beshovs left in Dashny. Ivan's brother emigrated to America. His sisters are believed to have died in Russia. Ivan joined the Russian Imperial Navy at the age of 17 and was on board the Potemkin when the crew revolted and took the battleship to the port of Odessa. Iván Bešov said that the massacre depicted here on the famous steps of Odessa, known afterwards as the Potemkin steps, never actually happened. It was dramatic license to illustrate the awful times that people were living in. And for the sailors on the Potemkin, it was terrible conditions and circumstances which led them to mutiny.
He described the conditions on the Potemkin as being very difficult. Mainly the problem they had was the poor quality of food, and that they were left starving on a number of occasions, and they mutinied, revolted against the officers. And it's also rumoured that at the time that they attacked one of the port cities in the Black Sea.
A piece of the Potemkin is now on display in the museum in Odessa. The sailors, we're told, took the ship to Romania and later dispersed from there to many corners of the world. Among them was Iván Bešov.
He was in Italy for a time, and then he went to London. And it's rumoured that he was a friend of Lenin. And Lenin then introduced him to James Larkin. And James Larkin invited him to Dublin. And I think he was more or less just dropping in on his way to the US. But as I said, he never made it to the US. He liked it in Dublin and he stayed, but he never had any desire to go back to the Ukraine.
Ivan worked for a Russian oil company for a time, but then he went into the fish and chip business.
He had a few Italian friends at the time, and they seemed to be going into the fish and chip business, and he decided it was an easy way to do something productive and make money.
Back in Ukraine, a museum dedicated to Ukrainians who became famous abroad has recently been opened in Kiev, and President Yushchenko's brother shows us where Iván Beshov's portrait hangs.
Iván Bešov is the classical representative of the Ukrainians who gained the popularity in other countries, especially in Ireland. He was poor, and due to his talent of manager, he became world famous with his restaurants, and he contributed greatly to the economy of Ireland.
Yeah, he was definitely Irish, and he always said that he would never trade Russian vodka for Irish whiskey. He made an awful lot of friends. He was a well-known character, and an awful lot of people could tell you some crazy stories about him. He had a huge tolerance to alcohol. Having said that, it never stopped him from working. He worked every day, and he was always extremely physically active, whether it was chopping his own firewood or gardening or painting the house, which he did at 90 years of age. Even to the day he died, he always spoke English with a broken accent, and you could always detect the foreign accent there. He did make attempts at speaking Oscailga. A good friend of his was a former Taoiseach who he frequently referred to as the real Taoiseach at the time. He died a few years ago at the age officially of 104, although we believe he may have been older because at the time in the Ukraine it wasn't uncommon for births not to be registered for at least 2 or 3 years after the birth. So probably he was between 104 and 107 years of age.
Ivan Beshov was the longest living survivor of the Potemkin, but his legacy now lies in a successful business and a family proud of his achievements in his adopted home of Ireland.
And they came from the Ukraine to show us how to get our fish and chips right. That ends the programme for this evening. Do join us again on Monday next. Until then, from Lissadell and County Sligo, from all of us in the nationwide team, a very good evening to you. And on next Monday's programme, the generations-old story of Irishmen joining the British Army. We know of their sacrifice in World War I, then of their brave service in World War II. But it all goes back much further than that, and indeed continues today. On Monday we have a special report on the Irishman who joined the most famous Irish regiment of the British Army.